This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey everyone, I know that you are going to get so much richness out of this conversation that I had with the incredible Dr. Laura Gallaher. She is an organizational psychologist, and we have just an incredible conversation about the intersection between us as human beings and our own journey. And she has so many great sayings, and she's got a free assessment tool that you're going to want to leverage of how we can practice what she calls radical self-acceptance and be working on getting better and growing at the same time. We talk about how that intersects with psychological safety on the team level. We talk about what that looks like organizationally with culture. Her career started working at NASA a couple of years after the Columbia accident. And so she's just got some really amazing stories and looking at feedback and really just looking at three core elements of maturity in organizations and how her model fits into that. You're going to end up stopping. You're going to end up writing nuggets down and going back to it. This is one you're going to listen to more than once, share with others. I hope you get as much out of this conversation as I did. Laura, I have been waiting for this conversation. One, everyone just needs to know that we learned that we share a mutual love of sparkle. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just right there, this was a conversation that was meant to be. But besides the love of sparkle, I am really excited to have it. I think this is going to be one of those geek out sessions that people are going to be listening to for us. And, as we are recording this, we are releasing our research after 5 years of looking at leader data. And it's about the faulty programming we all have, but I just call it what it is. It's head trash. And we all know what that means. We have this god-awful head trash that was programmed into us early in our lives, whether we had a happy childhood or not, and it still hijacks us more than we'd like to admit. And we are just funny creatures. We're messy and we get in our own way, and then we beat ourselves up about it. And so I just love that one of the things that you work on and talk about is this idea of radical self-acceptance, which is not complacency. It's, reminds me of Dr. Kristen Neff's work as well with self-compassion. And so I just think that right now, our world is always challenging. There's so many more challenges going on in our world. And I just see, almost an escalation of the head trash. And I see so many people questioning themselves, and whether it's rightfully so, whether they're being gaslighted, whatever it is. I just think there's a lot of churn going on right now. And so I just want to dive in. So tell us a little bit about you, first of all, and how you got into this world of radical self-acceptance. And then we're just going to geek out.
Okay, I'm so excited. Well, so as you know, I'm a psychologist, and specifically I'm an organizational psychologist. So I am somebody who's very passionate about inspiring introspection in others. And I got started actually applying the science of human behavior at NASA. So the Spatial Columbia accident happened in 2003. Do you remember when that happened, Rosie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of people think about Challenger, which was in the 80s. I was alive, but I was very, very little. So I didn't work with NASA following that accident. But Columbia was the accident where we lost the space shuttle on reentry. And so not as many people were watching live when it was happening. But the investigation looked into the causes, and they found that there was a piece of foam that actually fell off the external tank and it hit the orbiter during the launch. So the astronauts were able to, for the most part, complete their mission in orbit. But when they were cleared to come back to Earth, the heat shield was so badly damaged that they didn't make it. And so the investigation said that the foam was obviously to blame, but they also blamed NASA's culture. And I'm not sure about you, Rosie, but when I hear that, I assume that means that their culture was terrible, that they had disengaged employees, overbearing managers, people who didn't care. And that could not have been further from the truth. In fact, just a couple months before the accident, NASA was rated the #1 place to work in the federal government. You have some of the smartest people. You have literal rocket scientists. You have Nobel Prize winners. You have some of the most engaged people. NASA's employees would give back tens of thousands of hours of paid time off because they were so dedicated to the mission. I worked there for almost 8 years, and I never met a single soul who didn't care deeply about the lives of the astronauts. So for the investigation to say that culture was as much to blame as the foam really raised some eyebrows. And my now business partner, Dr. Philip Mead, was asked to lead the culture change initiative at Kennedy Space Center. And his background, he has a PhD in industrial engineering. And then he learned there's this whole field of industrial organizational psychology that exists to help people understand, explain, and predict human behavior at work. So he hired me and a team of organizational psychologists to come in and work with him to transform and really manage and enhance NASA's culture. So that's actually how I got started. I was at the ripe age of 24 years old when I was hired.
No small gig at 24. Like, holy crap, I'm going to work for NASA. Like, dang.
Yes. I was, gosh, in my early 20s especially, I had a lot of self-importance going on to start with. And I thought that what I was doing was incredibly important. And then on top of that, to learn what was happening at NASA and what they were attributing it to, and that they were seeing value in this organizational psychology work. It was almost overwhelming, truly. And so I was working there with leaders to help them create psychological safety, because there's more than what we can really unpack in our episode here today about what was going on there. But one of my key responsibilities was to coach and train and educate the leaders on how to create psychological safety on their teams. You want to have the kind of environment where people are willing to be vulnerable. And in the case of NASA, for Columbia, that meant being willing to speak up about a concern that was potentially catastrophic in an organization where failure is not an option is a key motto. And walls say, "In God we trust, all others must bring data."
Oh, my. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they don't have data to back up what they think, because that was the problem. Actually, there was a lack of data for them to really know what was going on. So the level of vulnerability that was required for these engineers to speak up past a certain point and say that they really thought this was an issue is actually incredibly high. And most people don't realize how vulnerable that really would have felt. The level of psychological safety that's needed was greater than what was present. And so that's what I was there to do. But I had a very humbling experience myself after being there for a couple of years. I had moved into a position of leadership, and I was at a leadership training, and I did one of many 360s. Have you done one of those lovely assessments? Yeah, I have a lot of opinions about those now.
Oh, yeah. If you ever want to be, let's see. I mean, we use 360s all the time in our work because we all have shadow sides that we can't see. And I will say that sometimes it's like very affirming and, oh my gosh, when your head trash takes over. And sometimes, whoo, it's a blow to the ego and a humbling experience when you're like, damn, I didn't realize I was coming across that way. Shoot.
I know. Oh, yeah. And this one, I did so many 360s, but this one really stood out to me because I was pretty early in my genuine role as a leader. I think I was probably one of those people that was like, I'm a leader, like no matter what, which I totally believe in. People can be a leader at any level in an organization. But now I was actually in a leadership role. And I remember, the report was like 30 pages, like this thick report. And I'm sitting at the lunch table, kind of eating, but just like poring over the results. And for the most part, the feedback was quite positive. My leaders, my customers, my peers, like I had really good feedback. But there's this one section in the report that was talking about negative influence tactics. And a couple people on my team indicated that they felt that sometimes I would bully them intellectually. Oh, gut punch, Rosie. Like I don't know what my face looked like, but I was meeting with my coach later that afternoon, and she was like, "Oh my God, I saw your face when you're reading that report. It was hilarious." And I'm like, wasn't funny to me. I know. Glad I can entertain
Thank you for getting entertainment out of my pain and misery. All right.
Pain,
Yeah.
I know. But it was so jarring to me. And I mean, what was so like embarrassing and painful and hard is that here I am, PhD in organizational psychology, brought in to help leaders create psychological safety. And I was struggling to do that for at least a couple people on my own team. So it was incredibly humbling. And it was when I felt really inspired to become introspective, because it's not enough to know. You can't just know what psychological safety is and understand what the ingredients are, because you talk about head trash. We're so self-deceived as human beings. We're all self-deceived. I am still very self-deceived as I sit here today, but I am more self-aware than I used to be. And that self-deception is what is really problematic for us. Defense mechanisms were happening for me left and right, and I didn't realize that they were happening for me. Like, at no point, Rosie, did I consciously think, let me just bully them intellectually and then they'll agree. Like, right? Like, there's no part of me that wanted to do that.
No, we don't wake up and go, I'm going to be a difficult butthead today. Like,
Right.
most people don't do that. Let's be real. Yeah.
They really, really don't. And even when we can look back at a moment and go in hindsight, like, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best, we're so quick to rationalize it because that's what our defenses are all about. And so I became very introspective, really wanted to better understand what were some of the behaviors that would lead people to think that I was bullying them intellectually. And maybe even more importantly than that, like, what's going on for me internally that's what's coming out. And so that's when my love affair with self-awareness and self-acceptance really started, because what I came to learn through so much experience, so much like painful, tearing down and rebuilding, is that it's a lack of self-acceptance that causes all of these defense mechanisms, which is precisely how we get in our own way. But most people don't understand what self-acceptance is. Like you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, they think it's complacency. That's the first fear. I think you and I both work with a lot of high achievers, and they immediately think, I can't accept myself, then I'm going to stop growing.
Yeah, they think like I'm going to lose my edge, or I'm going to get complacent, or I'm going to fill in the blank. Like, yeah, they view, like, even when I talk to them about, Dr. Kristen Neff's work of self-compassion and some of her work as well, it's like, let's be honest, it's how we grew up. So like I always talk about, I grew up in an overachieving family and whatnot. And it's not like someone came to me and said, Rosie, you must achieve. But it's our meaning making systems and those imprint periods that you create a narrative or how the world works, that if you're going to be accepted, in my case, you better get good grades. You better work your butt off. You better not screw up. You better be perfect. You better just be like the best at everything. And because that's what got attention and everything else was ignored, or you got yelled at or something. And so many people who are high achieving, like that experience, that narrative, that what programming serves them well to a point, right? But then to your point, it gets to where, oh, but then if I'm feeling insecure, what do I go to? I go to achievements. If I'm feeling insecure about who I am, if I'm feeling insecure about my body, if I'm feeling insecure about pick anything, I know what I'm good at is, well, I can achieve and I can get shit done. And so you double down on that. But then what does it do? Other people might feel like you're bulldozing them or taking over a conversation, or people in my life will say like, well, then you're a workaholic and you don't care about your relationships, or it 100% shows up in different ways. And I think that you're right. When we don't slow the heck down to do some of that deep introspective work to understand, A, this is happening, B, what triggers this to get activated in me, C, where did it come from? Because we do have to understand where it came from to go, oh, okay, Rosie, you're not 10 anymore. Rosie, you're not 5 anymore. Rosie, you didn't spill the milk here. Okay, or whatever the heck it is, right? And there's a whole lot of pieces that go into what we call the inner operating system upgrade process. But you're right, it starts with that self-awareness, but you have to go more than being awareness by itself doesn't do anything. It's in what do you do? And the other thing I loved about what you shared is that, you talked about like the vulnerability with NASA, and people don't realize if you're going to ask someone to be introspective, you are asking them to fundamentally lean into vulnerability, uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's the cringiness Brene Brown talks about. And most of us also might have a programming that says, vulnerability, you get your ass kicked. No, thank you. And so, yeah. So anyway, and then there's one thing I want to say that I'm going to shut up for a second, but I was like, oh my God, yes. But when you were talking about like NASA and like how, your failure is not an option, I think that there's a really important distinction for the purposes of this conversation and just in general for everybody, Brene Brown makes this so well in the Dare to Lead work that we deliver on her behalf. And there is a fundamental difference between systemic vulnerability and interpersonal vulnerability. And I know they've put the entire NASA team through Dare to Lead post you being there. And so I think that, when you talk about like NASA, it's a good example of you need to have flawless systems or people die. But imperfect people build those systems. And so if someone isn't going to speak up and say, I have a concern about this, which means if people aren't going to be vulnerable along the way, those systems now are vulnerable. So anyway, I just think that there's such an important difference. But so talk about that link then, because, if I'm going to go into introspection and I'm going to start to practice self-acceptance, I have to be willing to lean into vulnerability. And I have to understand the difference of interpersonal vulnerability versus systemic. I have to be in a psychologically safe environment to do so. So talk about your journey of how that worked for you and then what you do with others.
So there is such a close relationship in my mind so we really talk about 3 core elements of maturity within an organization, and that's self-acceptance, self-awareness, and self-accountability. And they really all play very nicely together. And self-acceptance is going to be the ceiling on your self-awareness at any given moment. So the way that I like to help people understand this is, Rosie, I know you've done a lot of your own personal growth work. So do you still have your inner critic, or do you at least remember?
Oh God, yeah. It doesn't go away.
Go away.
Like this is like people like, if you think that goes away, I just get better at catching it sooner and then going, shut the hell up. But she's there every day, all day, every day.
Yeah. So, okay. And you know how your inner critic tends to speak to you. So I ask leaders to think about, imagine an employee comes to speak to you and they are sharing something that's even a little bit vulnerable, like, I've made a mistake, or I don't understand something, or hey, I think I've missed this. And now imagine that you spoke to that employee the way your inner critic speaks to you. And like, see that scene and like, feel the cringe around that. And now ask yourself, is that employee more likely or less likely to come back to you again when there's a mistake or an oversight or something you don't understand? They're a lot less likely to come back to you because that was not a pleasant experience. And the same thing works for us internally in our own minds. So when your inner critic is raging, your brain actually works to hide information from that critic. And this is hard for a lot of high achievers to understand because they feel like they can still point to so many things that they judge themselves for, that they don't feel like there's anything that's hidden. But there's actually so much. It's the much deeper, darker story that they have, mistakenly programmed in when they were little. So where it might be something small on the surface, like having made a mistake, what I want to do to just defend is just tell myself like, well, but I didn't have the right information, or that department didn't give me what I needed. Like, I want to deflect, I want to blame, I want to point fingers. All of those are defense mechanisms to protect me against my own self-judgment. And so it's increasing self-acceptance that decreases the need for all those defense mechanisms, which are the really obnoxious ways that we get in our own way. So learning how to be compassionate with yourself, right? You refer to Dr. Kristen Neff's work, and Tara Brach also has some incredible work on this. She's got her RAIN model that I think is really valuable to recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture whatever's coming up. Really changing the relationship that you have with yourself in the same way that you would want to change the interaction with the employee. When you can do that for yourself and you elevate your self-acceptance, now you let yourself actually become more self-aware. Now you better understand, what are all of those really harsh judgments that I was holding about myself? And like you were saying before, where does that come from? And what's really true? And how do I want to rewrite that for myself moving forward? So that's that process. I think it's very similar, right, to the work that you do. But my experience is that a lot of high achievers need to be convinced that self-acceptance is not the opposite of self-improvement. They need to recognize they coexist. And it's paradox theory that says that, I can be high on self-improvement and low on self-acceptance. Like I can be high self-improvement and really judge myself, or I can be high self-acceptance and high self-improvement. I can do both of those things. And the research is really clear that when people are higher on self-acceptance, they actually grow faster and they have a much more enjoyable journey. So that's so much what my work is about. And a lot of it's about breaking through those myths of self-acceptance. So these high achievers are willing to even lean into it as a practice.
I love that. As you're talking, the way I describe it is it's not an either or, it's a both and. Like we can accept ourselves for who we are today and be working to constantly improve and grow and get better. And I was even having a coaching conversation with an executive leader yesterday, and we're talking about, for yourself and for other people, we're talking about this idea of, leaning into generosity, that people are doing the best that they can. And it's not doing that in the absence of boundaries or standards, because then it's just lack of accountability or being a doormat or apathy or whatever you want to call it. But it's recognizing, okay, so like if this person is truly doing the best that they can, let's say in an organization or on your team, and you have given them very clear guidelines and parameters of what success looks like, and you've aligned on done. If you have given them the various training and tools and everything they need to be successful, you've had the growth feedback conversations, and it's just not working out, well, then what you probably need to do is move them along, and because it doesn't benefit anybody, right? So like they truly are doing the best that they can. But then there is you got someone who's going through a really tough season. They've got stuff going on in their personal life. They are not performing the way they normally do, but this is a season. This is a chapter. And so you're like, are they doing the best that they can right now? Yes. Is their best right now their absolute best? Probably not. But can we be okay with that this is a season and, there's nothing detrimental, and we know that there, or like my best when I'm not feeling well, or my best when whatever is not going to be the same as my best on another day, but can I accept that rather than beat myself up and go, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Like I'm on the struggle bus today, so this is me doing my best. And this is how I'm going to care for that so that I don't go into that, head trash, self-judgment, shame spiral. And then it's kind of like, what do I now need to do to nurture that this is the space I'm in today? And how can I, doesn't mean that I want to be like this every day, but this is today and I'm a human being. So how do I care for it?
Yes. And that level of self-acceptance that you're describing right now is necessary for the step that you mentioned, which is to actually be open about it. Right. I mean, I'm definitely aware of situations where an employee is going through a season. It's a chapter. And maybe they're brand new to a job and we're just catching them in not a good moment. But if they are not open about what's going on for them, then it's very difficult for people around them to know, well, which situation are we dealing with here? Is this a case where you're just struggling to do your best right now? Or is this the best that you've got and we're looking for something different? So we want you to move along. It's self-judgment that keeps us wanting to hold things private, keep them secret. And, when we talk about openness in our work, it's through the lens of effectiveness. So we don't tell people just share everything, verbal diarrhea, no matter what, just for the sake of being open. It's about recognizing when is it really useful to be open, which way more often than people think it's useful to be open. And that's a lever that you can pull. I don't have to tell you all the details of what's going on for me. If I'm struggling right now, I can simply tell you that I'm struggling, and if you can have grace for me in this area. And this is especially true for leaders, right? Because leaders are sending signals through everything they do and don't do, and everything they say and don't say. And you have a disproportionate impact on the team and the organization when you're a leader. So the more you can practice genuine openness, the less people are going to rely on all those stories they're making up in their own minds. They're still going to do it to some degree, but that's where like leaning into that vulnerability and being open is so important. And people think that they're not being open because they're afraid that others will judge them. And that's true, but the only reason that they worry about other people judging them for fill in the blank is because they judge themselves for.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. Well, and we always say ad nauseum in our work, in the absence of data, our brains will fill it in with story, which is more reason why. Now, let's be honest, for the people who are listening here, if you have a formal people leadership role, there are certain things that, of course, are at a level of need to know or whatever in an organization that you can't share, right? Like if you know that there's a reorg coming, you can't, like there's things that you can't share. But to the extent that you can be transparent about stuff, you're always going to err on a better side because people will fill in that space. But when it comes to ourselves, yeah, you're right. We fill in spaces all the time. So the work we do, probably similar to yours, in addition to one-on-one, like we do a lot of parallel while we do individual work and then team-based work to give them core and common language so that you could say like, hey, we're doing a team check-in at the huddle. And either, sometimes we'll do the 2-word check-in or sometimes we'll do, are you above or below the line or whatnot? And then, again, you don't have to get into why, but you can tell when someone's on the struggle bus or whatnot. And it's like, okay, so-and-so, how can we pick up the slack for you today? Or what might that look like? Or we're going to give that person a little extra grace because we know that they're just not their best today, whatever that is. But you're right, as a leader, I know that there have been times, and I want to say it was maybe a year ago. I mean, it's been the last year and a half that I just remember there was just bombarded stuff and I was buried. And I just said to my team, I'm like, you guys, I'm asking for some extra grace right now. I am so buried and I feel like I'm barely treading water and I'm doing the best that I can. So if I'm not getting back to you, please like ping me or know that I'm not intentionally trying to ignore you. I'm so if it's urgent and I forgot because I'm getting 500 emails a day, can you just gently ping me? And they're like, okay, thanks. And then they're like, is there anything I can do to support you? Where versus I'm going to try to keep it all together. And then they're pissed off because I'm not responding to their emails or I'm more hectic in meetings, like more task focus. And it's just like, I'm asking for a little bit of extra grace right now. And you think they're going to judge you because we are. I would think if my inner critic, if I'm honest with myself, and again, I'm pretty good at keeping her at bay, but even in that moment, there's a bit of, I should be able to handle all this. Like, what the hell is wrong with me? Or I should be kinder to my team. I always say they're number one. And right now I'm being derailed by XYZ. Like, it's this narrative that you could get into. And it's just like, nope, this is real. Here you go. I'm asking for grace. And it just like when you speak it out loud, it just doesn't have the power. And you think people are going to judge you, but usually they lean in with curiosity and empathy and support. It's the opposite of what that head trash or that inner critic would have us believe.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's even research that supports that people don't judge you for your shortcomings. They judge you based on your perceived awareness of your shortcomings. So your ability to recognize like, hey, I'm probably not showing up as my best. I'm probably not as responsive as I want to be. I might be missing things when I'm getting back to you. Even just you acknowledging that is going to usually significantly reduce how much people are judging you. It's like, okay, so she understands. She knows what's going on. She can see this is happening. And it's that much more reason to lean into that vulnerability. So recognizing, okay, my self-judgment is what I'm actually afraid of and not even the judgment of other people means that, again, I want to inspire introspection. I want to look and say, all right, so what is the story in my head about somebody who doesn't respond to emails? I've got some really mean, really negative, really judgy story about somebody like that. And I actually do. I want to work to surface it, like you were saying. Like, what is it? Let me look it in the face and then bring compassion in. Okay, can I have compassion for the fact that somebody might miss an email or not be as responsive? And normally people are able to start to get there. I have one little example that I like to use for people who struggle with self-compassion. And you probably use something similar, but I ask people to think about a child who is experiencing a lot of difficulty at home. And perhaps this can be like a trigger warning for anybody if this is a difficult topic for them. But if you think about somebody who actually experiences physical abuse at home, a child, and now this child goes to school and he starts a fight and he hurts another child. Okay. So we can look at this behavior of him starting a fight and hurting another child. And I can ask you, is that behavior okay? Is that an acceptable thing? Is it above the bar? Is it above your standard? People are going to say, no, of course not. Okay. Can you also have compassion for this child? And overwhelmingly, of course, people say yes. And so just highlighting the fact that compassion and boundaries can coexist, that I can simultaneously have compassion for somebody else or for myself while still thinking that whatever my behavior was not above the bar of okay for me. And that is usually like a big moment for people to recognize, okay, so compassion doesn't mean that I'm excusing it away. It doesn't mean that I'm saying that it's acceptable. I can actually hold compassion even though this behavior is unacceptable to me. And that's usually really big.
Yeah, I mean, that is a mic drop moment. Compassion and boundaries coexist because I think we do tend to do a lot of either or. And I love that example for so many reasons, Laura. And one is that, there's that saying that hurt people hurt other people. And it's also a reflection of, when we talk about the faulty programming that hijacks us in adulthood, it came from childhood. And it doesn't matter if you had a horrific childhood, like you're getting beat up at home or something else, or you had a happy childhood or everything in between. It's how our brains developmentally, as you know, make sense of our experiences. And, as you were saying that, it got me thinking about like when our son was in elementary school, he's now in middle school, but he would talk about, some kid that is being verbally bullying or, these types of behaviors. And we talked to him regularly and said, and he had some stuff recently, and we've always said to him, Peyton, your superpower is kindness, but you don't have to accept what they're doing. So we would always say, it's really sad because when you have a kid in 4th grade, in 3rd grade or whatever that is behaving that way, it makes you wonder what is going on in their environment, whether it is with siblings, parents. I mean, right? We say environment broadly because it may not be their home environment. It might be something else. And we're like, it makes you wonder what must be going on in their environment that behavior either feels normal or it's their way of getting attention or whatever it is. Like that's sad. And then because when he would be all, oh, this kid's a jerk, you can still think that kid's a jerk. But can you think a moment what his life must be like that he feels he needs to behave that way? And he'd usually go, oh. And I'm like, so all I'm saying is you don't have to hang out with him. He raises a hand to you, you absolutely no thank, right? You have boundaries, but like also you just go, God, how sad that he feels he needs to treat people that way. And you don't need to be on the receiving end of it, but you also don't have to stand and like give him a lot of airtime or energy.
Absolutely. And our mantra, I think, that captures what you're saying is get curious, not furious.
Ooh, yes.
Right? I got that from Celeste Blackman. It's not mine, but I love it. So get curious, not furious. So when somebody's behaving like a jerk, they're being whatever. Yeah, you might feel irritated, bugged. Maybe you're not always furious, but it's cuter when it rhymes.
It is cute. It's like, stop rhyming. I mean it. Anybody want a peanut? Like, who doesn't love a good rhyme? Come on. Anyway,
it sticks in the brain better. But when you start to feel like that irritation, that bug, that desire to label somebody else, instead of getting furious, get curious, lean in, just like you were saying. Like, what might be going on for this person? And I myself, I remember when I was in college, I was a hostess at Applebee's. That was my college job for, I think, freshman year. And I was having a day. Like, I don't even know what my deal was. I was just cranky and the store hadn't quite opened yet. And normally, Rosie, I was very like, I'm a very good employee. I'm a good student. I'm a good everything. And the manager came over and he asked a question about the seating chart. And I said, I forget what the details were, but I was like, well, this is just the same as that, so it doesn't matter. And like totally had this like edge to my voice. And you might think, he's my manager, so he might get mad at me or whatever. But it was very uncharacteristic of me. And he just looked at me and he goes, are you okay? And I just started bawling. It's like, oh my God. Like, just that simple act of curiosity and compassion for me in the moment. And truthfully, Rosie, like I wasn't even consciously aware that I was feeling so not great until he was a mirror back for me and his kindness back in the face of me, being all crunchy at him. It was a game changer, right? And so like I took a moment, went to the bathroom, like composed myself, and I came back and I was apologetic. And what a beautiful moment he just created there, right? And like, oh my gosh, I was already shaming myself enough around like, yeah, don't talk to my manager like that. But he was able to meet it with kindness. And so like I've been on the receiving end of how beautiful that can be. And nothing's a panacea or a catch-all, but it can really transform a moment and turn somebody from a jerk into something very different.
Well, yeah, and as you're saying that to on any level of our lives, it can do that, and I think back to the start of our conversation and talking about psychological safety, and anyone that's familiar who's listening with Amy Edmondson's work, psychological safety exists at the team level, and the formal leader of that team has the biggest influence. So how for those of you listening that are formal leaders, again, everyone can be a leader, but how you show up is gonna like your manager doing that to you, when you were in college and worked at Applebee's, or, me with my team saying, "Please give me extra grace," or whatever it might be. But then you think about even, like, for those that are listening that are parents, like, how you express that with your kids, or if you are in some kind of community group. I mean, it really does just take one person to be brave enough to lean into that vulnerability and hold a space where, "Oh, okay," like, I've been on other even virtual groups where we're just doing a quick check-in and it's like networking, but somebody who goes first and is like they set the tone and it's like, "Oh, we're going there." Okay. It's super, super powerful. And as you were talking about self-compassion, I love the like imagine this kid. There's another exercise, I'm curious if you do this one as well, that is so simple, but people are like they end up having all kinds of emotional reactions to it. So it is where we're like, "Okay, I want you to picture someone in your life right now who is going through a tough time, who is struggling, however you define that. And then you're going to write a letter, and we're talking 3 to 4 sentences. We're not gonna go like this big long. And what would you wanna offer that person in terms of words of comfort, empathy, compassion that you think they hear right now? So you go, "Dear so and so," you write it out. And then great. Now rewrite that right next to it, like side by side. Write those same 4 sentences, but keep out the dear, you know, Bob or whoever. And they're like, "Okay, are you done? Okay, now put dear self, and now read it to yourself." And it's the whole talk to yourself like you would talk to someone you love, and usually people are just like it's like, what does your 10-year-old self need to hear right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that reparenting. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I love that. I haven't done the letter exercise, but I've done the, like, be your own best friend as one of the key things is just even just imagining, like, yeah, what would I say to somebody else? And so shifting behaviorally, how do I act toward myself is a key part of growing that self-acceptance. And then the other way to think about it is from a thought or feeling. So how do I think and feel about myself and how do I behave toward myself? They're both very viable starting places for people to begin that self-acceptance journey if they haven't already started it.
Yeah. So I know you have like a free quiz that you're gonna offer up to people that they can use, but like how do we even start if we've done none of this work or if we wanna go deeper in this work, what do we do?
Oh gosh. Well, there is a lot. Do you want me to can I talk about the quiz now or did you want me to wait on that?
Yes, please. Yeah, do it. Because everyone, it's gonna be in the show notes, so go take it. But yes, let's talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just selfacceptancequiz.com. So if anybody's like driving or doing laundry right now, hopefully that can stick in your brain, selfacceptancequiz.com. And it's really short. It's only going to take you 3 or 4 minutes probably to fill it out. And then you're going to get a report and it's going to show you for right now. This is a point in time. This is not like you're locked in here forever. But where are you right now on this 2 by 2 matrix? Are you high or low on self-acceptance and are you high or low on self-improvement? Because paradox theory points out that you can absolutely be high on both. And that's really where we have the healthiest self concept, where you feel genuinely at peace and good about where you are right now. And you are still motivated and inspired to grow and improve. And a lot of our high achieving people kind of end up more in like a perfectionist area where they're really high on self improvement, but also consumed with self judgment. And there's this quote from Dr. Robert Holden that says, there is no amount of self improvement that ever makes up for a lack of self acceptance.
Oh, okay. Say that again. Say that. That's a mic drop one. Say it again.
There is no amount of self improvement that ever makes up for a lack of self acceptance.
Yes. Yes.
It's the biggest myth that high achievers, especially leaders, tell themselves. It's this belief that once I just get to this level, I make this much revenue in my business, I hit this promotion in my organization, I get that bigger house, I like looking at all of the external variables and thinking, genuinely believing, once I get there, then I'm going to feel like I can accept myself. And it's never true. It's never real. It's moving milestones. It always moves, it always shifts. And so that, like, honestly, Rosie, that in and of itself, if your listeners can just recognize that there's always going to be something. They're listening to this show because they're dedicated to their self-improvement. I don't doubt that for a second. I know they're high on self-improvement. So there's always going to be some area where they see a gap, some place they want to improve upon. I don't think any of your listeners are ever going to be like, you know what? I think I'm done. I don't, right? Like, I don't think there's anything more for me to grow here. Like, I just don't see that for them. There's always going to be a gap that they see that they might feel excited to fill. So that is a terrible reason to not accept yourself right now, especially when you realize that that self-acceptance transforms the entire journey and the entire experience of self-improvement and life as a whole.
Yes. Well, and I would say, yeah, most likely people who are listening to this do want self-improvement. Although I will say it doesn't happen all that often, but in almost every single client that we work with, there is at least one leader somewhere. And I think it's a defense mechanism, but they think they're beyond development. Like, I got a degree in leadership, therefore, nope. Or I'm like, oh, and I always say, like, I don't care if you have been a formal leader for 50 years. I don't care if you're the freaking CEO. If you don't think that this is an ongoing journey in our life and you think you've somehow, quote unquote, arrived and you're done, first, I think my BS meter's going off 5 million, like, woo-woo, sirens.
Big time. I've got the Journey tattoo.
Oh,
right
yeah,
here.
she has a Journey tattoo. I love it. I like not Journey the band, but
Yeah. Not the band. It's my next tattoo right there.
I know that, yeah, I love it, right? Get the wings or whatever it is. But for real, it is that if you think you're above development, that you don't need to grow anymore, that is a huge red flag, I always say, because you do need someone who it's not just self-acceptance, I'm done. And you don't want to just, so I love that. So, okay, everyone go take that. I think I need to take it. I don't think I take it, but I'm really curious now. So
Yeah. I think we send it to you. So I would love to chat with you about your results when you get them.
Oh, yeah, 100%, 100%. All right. So speaking of kind of the head trash and the self-acceptance, et cetera, right? That inner critic, as you know, in our work, we know that no matter how much work, you've done a lot of work on yourself. Yep, she still exists. So this is your time, Laura. What is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And what do you do when it shows up so that you can move beyond it and show up as the leader you want to be in your life?
There's a story that I have been actively working to rewrite for, I would say, at least the last year and a half. And I think I've made progress, but I can still feel it sitting with me a little bit. And that is that it's necessary to grind to achieve big things.
Oh, I know that one. Yes.
That was my life. I mean, I would grind to like a ridiculous degree, almost regardless of what was going on in my life. And I've started to gather evidence for myself that that is not true. Intellectually, I don't believe that it's true. And experientially, I'm still like, I just catch myself. There's so many times where I'm looking at something and I'm wanting it to be further along. And like I mentioned before we started recording, Rosie, I just got back from kind of a long vacation, one of the longer ones I've ever taken. And before it, we were looking at as a team at all of the work that we had for this quarter. And I could just hear my inner monologue being like, you know what? I could just get up early every day on vacation. I could just work on it. I could just knock these things out. Like I was totally about to like grind through my vacation because I'm thinking about all these things that have to get done. And I was like, I actually got really emotional about it with my team. I'm vulnerable with them all the time. And I was like, woof, okay, I'm feeling super overwhelmed looking at this workload. I'm starting to catch myself wanting to think that I have to grind in order to make this work. And I really don't want to do that. So let me just take a breath. Let me collect myself. Let me check the story in my head. What is it that I think is going to fall apart, in my world or in my life if I spend 11 days not working? You know what? I think it's going to be okay. So that's a story that I'm still working to shift.
Yeah. But I love that you're catching yourself and being vulnerable and like asking almost for your team's support, right? Like, help me keep this one in check, team. Here we go.
Yeah, they're very helpful.
You and I might be sisters from another mister. I'm just saying. Okay. Are you ready for quick questions?
Yes.
All right. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is
freeing.
Yes. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do?
Introspect and accept whatever choice you make is temporary.
Ooh, I like that one. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
I am not a parent and have no intentions to be.
There you go. What is your favorite go-to movie?
Going the distance.
That one hasn't come up in a long time. All right, I like that. Okay, what is your go-to song?
Oh gosh, I think Walking on Sunshine.
Do you know, fun little fact, love that song. When I was a junior in college, I studied abroad in England, and there was like a holiday or Christmas something or other dance or something before we flew back home. And no kidding, they had Katrina and the Waves there live doing Rocket. I was like, so
Fun.
that's my little fun fact about that one. Anyway, okay. What is something you can't live without?
Sunshine.
I am with you. Vitamin D all the way, baby.
I'm in the sunshine state and it's still not sunny enough for me sometimes.
What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Oh, dancing.
Any particular kind?
So I do this class. Sometimes it's called Bombshell. And so there's a lot of, it's like hip hop ish, but it's just very like a lot of feminine movement. It's really fun.
Oh my God, I would love that. We totally are like sisters from another mister. Okay. At some point when we see each other in person, we're going to a Bombshell class and we're gonna jam out to Katrina and the Waves and have her sparkle on. I'm just telling you. Okay. What are you grateful for right now?
I am extremely healthy and able bodied, and that is an amazing gift.
100%. All right, Laura, last closing question. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
I would invite leaders to lean in more to the question of how are you really? Inviting that extra opening for people to truly share what's going on for them and create that connection.
That would make a huge difference. I love that. Well, Laura, this has been such a pleasure. I could talk to you all day. I love little nuggets you've given me. I love this conversation so much. And so just thank you, thank you, thank you for what you've contributed to me in this conversation, but what I know that you're contributing to everyone who's listening. So much gratitude.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved this.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.